morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you? I'm Thomas Walker, and I'm privileged to serve in the role of president here at Wayne Community College, and really thank you for coming to today's program, and thank you for your patience in the matter, because as you know, it was scheduled prior, but we had a little event called Snow here, or at least Snow for Wayne County, and so we had to readjust our schedules. But thank you for coming, and I want to welcome you to this presentation entitled Achieving the Dream, Leading and Empowering Change, which is probably going to be a very poignant discussion. I think we live in one of the history's most interesting times, and I think it's important that we consider the legacy that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. left us, and also reassess where we've come in terms of achieving the dream. Now, part of this discussion and our esteemed panel, which they will introduce themselves, involves leading change. And so in trying to think about leading change, I put my own spin on this in that I think change begins with yourself. Back in my day, there was a popular rapper named Chuck D from Public Enemy who said, if you want to change your nation, you start on your corner. So with that being said, I want to leave some words around responsibility, personal responsibility, from one of Dr. Martin Luther King's sermons. One of the most common tendencies of human nature is that of placing responsibility on some external agency for sins we have committed or mistakes we have made. We are forever attempting to find some scapegoat on which we cast responsibility for our actions. Herein lies the tragic misuse of much of our modern psychology, particularly what is known as depth psychology or psychoanalysis. This school of thought affirms that many of our conscious actions are due to unconscious motives. Now, there's a kernel of truth in this theory, and we owe a great debt to Sigmund Freud for opening to us the uncharted regions of the subconscious. But the tragedy lies in the fact that many modern men have used this theory as an attractive defense mechanism. How easy it was to say that the unconscious emotions and repressed sex drives were responsible for our actions, rather than plain everyday sin. The word sin was gradually eliminated from the modern vocabulary, and there emerged in its place a series of bombastic psychological phrases such as phobias, complexes, and inhibitions. And so modern man was convinced that psychology has given him explanations which relieved him of any responsibility for his actions. And so the challenge which confronts us, all of us, is to respond to our circumstances with strength and courage rather than with weakness and despair. So I encourage you all, as we discuss change today, let's talk about the change that starts with the person in the mirror. And that being said, I welcome you to event and invite Mr. Lawson, Dean Lawson, up to the podium to proceed with the program. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wayne Community College's celebration of the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today's celebration will be a panel discussion presented by Wayne Community College's Cultural Diversity and Global Education Task Force. The title of today's panel discussion is Achieving the Dream, Leading and Empowering Change. Dr. King dreamed of a society where individuals were judged not by the color of their skin, but by the strength of their character. Dr. King and other civil rights activists made great strides in ending legal discrimination on the basis of race and other forms of immoral discrimination. And by being here today, we celebrate their worthy achievements. But prejudice based on race has not gone away entirely, and there are many ways people are prejudged today, including on the basis of race, religion, gender, transgender, sexual orientation, income, standard of living, even country or continent of origin. These are troubling times when even some of our highest elected officials can espouse these forms of bigotry and find an enthusiastic following. Today's panelists are here today to give their thoughts from their own experiences on how we can lead and empower positive change in the midst of these increasingly prejudicial times. These panelists are Wayne Early Middle College High School history teacher Patrick Brashears, Wayne Community College sociology instructor David Craig, Wayne Community College communications instructor Andrea Fraley, Wayne Community College psychology instructor and chair of the Cultural Diversity and Global Education Task Force, Bill Raboli, and Wayne Community College transitional programs director and record specialist Harold Warren. I am Dean Lawson, Wayne Community College history instructor, and I will be the moderator of today's proceedings. I will introduce all of the panelists, and then, one by one, the panelists will speak about today's theme, Achieving the Dream of Dr. King, Leading and Empowering Change. When the panelists have finished speaking, I will ask them all to respond to 2 questions, and then the panelists will take questions from the audience. Patrick Brashears. Patrick Brashears' dream is to one day live in a world without restrictions imposed by borders, ethnicity, race, and 20th century institutions such as the nation state. Patrick is from nowhere in particular and considers his roots to extend into and through all of his experiences. David Craig. David Craig is a native son of Goldsboro. His faith, religious upbringing, and his military experience drives his perseverance to better himself and his community. While in the military, he was awarded the Southwest Asia Service Medal with 2 Bronze Stars, and he is currently a PhD candidate in sociology at North Carolina State University. After defending his dissertation, he plans to devote his talents and skills for the bettering of his community. Andrea Fraley. Andrea Fraley hopes to create a classroom environment that honors meaningful connections. As a communications expert with more than 17 years of experience, she's worked for nonprofits, government agencies, private contractors, and TV programs. She also has experience teaching communications, foreign languages, diversity appreciation, and yoga to different audiences ranging from high school students to community leaders. She's very active in Wayne County and was recently featured in a Goldsboro News Argus Superwoman story featuring women who juggle several roles in the community. Andrea Fraley received her BA from Mount Olive University and her MA from Notre Dame of Maryland University. But she prides herself most for having the superpower to teach students how to listen to engage, how to speak to advocate. William Bill Raboli. William Bill Raboli is a doctoral student studying social psychology and human motivation. He holds a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and a bachelor's degree in psychology. Bill has more than 20 years as an educator and is also as a licensed family therapist. He is a consultant, advisor, mentor, and advocate and has helped countless individuals and families. Harold Warren. Harold Warren has been an employee of Wayne Community College since 1987. He has served the college well as a transitional programs director, registrar, advisor, and record keeper. Mr. Warren is also an ordained missionary Baptist pastor and has served Liberty Grove Baptist Church in LaGrange for 33 years and Hooks Grove Baptist Church in Pikeville for 10 years. He is a member of several ecumenical groups and some civic organizations. He is married to the former Sharon D. Sutton, and they have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. So now I'll call on our panelists to come and deliver their comments. Patrick, come next.
I thought I'd be sitting the whole time, so they've already thrown me off. But okay, so when I was asked to do this again, and I was given the job of talking about what I've done to stand up for justice, it was hard for me to answer that because I don't see it the same way I guess most people see it. So I didn't want to just come up here and talk about justice or engaging in protest or other activities that attempt to create justice. I want to talk about a system that we have that tries to create the illusion of justice. Because capitalism creates institutions that are driven by profit. Justice and equity, they're not the point or motivation of capitalism. Capitalism is embedded into our political system through funding and lobbying politicians at all levels. I really wanted to talk about identity politics today. Identity politics refers to political positions based on the interests and perspectives based on social groups with which people identify. Although it is important for people to push for issues important to their communities, identity politics is often used as a tool to divide and conquer. It promotes the division of people into unique identities that focus on differences rather than similarities. Throughout time, race and gender have been used to prevent social change. It's a barrier that prevents collaboration between those of the same economic position. Farmer movements of the late 19th century really pushed for reforms such as a gold and silver standard, public warehouses where you could put excess crops to help keep the price high, and democratic reforms such as a referendum. However, their problem was they did not unite. They excluded African American and Latin American farmers. So you had these farmer groups that were divided into white farmers, African American farmers, and Latino farmers. Yet all the farmers wanted the same thing. But because they couldn't come together and form one coalition, they were not strong enough to resist industrial capital of the Gilded Age. So to understand the position we are in, we have to face certain realities. 8.6% of the world's population owns 85.6% of global wealth. According to a report by the Pew Research Center, average hourly wages today have the same purchasing power that they had in 1979. At the same time, the corporate tax rate has fallen from a high of 50% to the most recent cut down to 20%. The capital gains tax rate has fallen from a high around 40% in 1977 to an average of about 15% now. Despite recessions that happen constantly, global GDP, or gross domestic product, has grown over the last 30 years. That's the total value of everything produced in a year. So corporations are not doing bad. They're doing actually pretty well. Economies are growing. Even trade agreements between nations have been including these clauses called investor-state dispute agreements. Now what that does is it allows a multinational corporation to sue a country over regulatory mechanisms that interrupt any of their revenue streams. So if a country wants to try to capture some of the income produced by a corporation and maybe bring it down to the people, the corporation can sue the country over such regulation. So capitalism doesn't view exploitation in terms of race or gender or sexual orientation. They don't view the world as nations, but rather markets where people are evaluated in terms of profit. So multinational corporations operate outside of borders and laws. Supply chains are positioned around the world based on friendly labor markets and tax laws that maximize profits rather than human dignity. So we all love Apple, right? How many of you have an iPhone? Almost everyone. I have one too, so I'm kind of a hypocrite, right? But Apple's one of the biggest companies in the world. It has a production chain that spans multiple continents. Apple determines their terms with smaller companies along this chain in order to maximize their profit. But this comes at the expense of workers around the world. So your iPhone, the people that are actually putting that iPhone together are getting paid pennies on the dollar. Finally, as the greatest insult of all, it puts its headquarters in Ireland. Now, why would you have your headquarters in Ireland if you were Apple? Can anybody imagine why? Because the corporate tax rate, right, is almost nothing. So even though Apple is actually headed, or their headquarters realistically are in America, they pretend to be in Ireland so they can pay less. So that's a lot of money that could be coming into the U.S. to help American citizens that's going straight to the top. Now, part of the problem is we understand this fight as a linear struggle. It's us versus them. Right? Everyone's heard of the Occupy movement, the 99% versus the 1%. The problem is there's no Occupy movement, there's no march, there's no protest that can win this war because it's not a traditional battle. The 1% of the people, these multinational corporations, the people on the board, they're part of the same constructs and the same institutions that attempt to maintain order among the rest of it. Look at it like this. Every ecosystem has a top dog. It's got a top predator, right? Now, that top predator is at the head of the food chain. However, the predator doesn't create the ecosystem, and it is reliant on the participation of all life down the chain in order to remain at the top. Now, what if you took this predator and you put it in a completely different ecosystem? It might not have the same success. So although these corporations, they certainly manage the institutions and they manipulate us through political and economic processes, they are also subjects of the same king. It is the idea of profit that destroys the human and the beast, and it's the dream of wealth that keeps the rest of us asleep. When did we decide to just simply be and hope for change? All of us have the power to create a new world that's not driven by profit, and that doesn't demand the sweat of those that are beneath us and around the world to deliver it. So throughout the world, there are dying communities struggling to reinvent themselves in a global market. Now, this represents a diverse set of values. If we all tapped it, it could create a global network of resources and innovative tools. So if you want equity, if you really care about justice, then your iPhone can't be the thing that exposes you to culture and people. We need people to be able to move throughout borders. You need to be able to move throughout borders. We cannot allow ourselves to be isolated by arbitrary lines on a map and regulated to mindless consumers. We can't see ourselves as splintered and divergent identities marching for some specialized cause. There is only really one cause, and it cannot be obtained by voting or a boycott or a march. Dignity cannot be ensured through a system that reduces human value to numbers on a ledger in order to maximize its efficiency. The only way to stand up for dignity is to engage in a cultural, political, and economic revolution. It begins with you. Each individual can change the circumstances around themselves, and collectively we can design robust communities that meet our needs with dignity and can enter markets equitably. Oftentimes, education is remarked as the gateway to the future. It's the cornerstone of democracy and the fabric of a well-rounded society. Despite these notions, education is redundant and underfunded, as well as mired in bureaucratic and antiquated institutions. We use the same models developed 100 years ago with minor tweaks that do not encourage innovation but stifle creativity with definitions of intelligence. Schools should model and instruct communities on sustainability through the application of green technologies with low capital in the surrounding communities. So whether it's solar or wind power, companion planting in local gardens, or sustainable waste methods such as thermal treatment, the goal should be to create independent yet globally aware individuals through the design of locally focused and inward to outward policy. Create policies that benefit communities, not corporations. So in a world where so much seems out of our control, the demand to create new institutions and novel solutions is extremely important. We live in a very fragile world. Globalization creates fragility that can threaten all aspects of human society and environmental health. So it's really easy to be apathetic when the context is so diluted by consumer culture, buy this, and political propaganda. You're not like me, you're not like me. So don't look towards the federal government and don't look towards global organizations for the impetus to create. Focus on yourself and the people around you to create opportunity and promote equitable institutions that sustain rather than drain our world of dignity. Thank you.
Good morning. Every moment we live presents us with an opportunity. Serve others or serve ourselves. The words of a New Testament teacher proclaim love, humility, and service. Furthermore, that service is not to be limited to persons who look like us or act like us. Jesus said, if you only have love for those who love you, or receive only those you see as your brother, you are not acting in a way that affirms higher order attributes. I'm saying that to say this. Many call themselves persons of faith, but don't know how to translate their faith into real-world action. Similarly, many of us draw upon ideals such as justice, equality, liberty, and democracy in the abstract without understanding how these things translate into action. Neither do some of us understand how these things are brought into being and maintained. As a result, some of us are unaware when we use these sacred ideals, and some of us are unaware when these sacred ideals are being threatened. And since there is no deeper understanding, this type of ignorance even allows for some of us to be on the wrong side of history and not even know it. Isaac Asimov said this: "There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge." Thomas Jefferson spoke as to how ignorance and large-scale misconceptions with regards to what are the facts and what facts are important leads to apathy or indifference, which he said is the forerunner to the death of liberty. You see, you cannot have democracy without real dialogue, but you can't have real dialogue with a person who doesn't care enough to educate themselves concerning the facts. People can have highly opinionated views that are not based on facts. Some people are adamant that they not only have the right to their opinion, but also the right to their opinion being heard and respected, even if they are blind to the facts or live by alternative facts. In the context of abstract ideals that are not cemented in human action, this allows for the undercutting of legitimate arguments. The phrase, "all lives matter," is used so as to undercut the legitimate factual foundation of the Black Lives Matter movement, so that cloaked under the abstract ideal that all lives matter, they are able to be indifferent to the pain suffered by Black people at the hands of law enforcement. Some people are animated, but when asked about other more important facts, they say things like, "Oh, I don't know nothing about that." They not only are indifferent, but they have a form of selective amnesia. So no real or meaningful dialogue takes place because, as Asimov says, there is this false notion that democracy means my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. If I was a preacher, I might say, having a zeal, but not according to knowledge. So there is this silence and seething anger that grows while persons loosely tie themselves to core American values and ideals while having no earthly clue how to hold true to the very things they say they believe. When discussing this disjuncture between our ideals and values, when discussing the disjuncture between our ideals and values and our actions, one of my students sent chills over my body when she said, "Don't talk about it, be about it." The question I pose to you is, how can we as a people really be about getting to the promised land when some of the we the people either don't believe in the promised land or stand in support of that dream, or they have no factual basis as to which of their actions work for or against the achieving of the dream, which is to get to the promised land? It appears again we abstractly embrace values and ideals contained in some of our sacred writings while not knowing how to do the work. At best, we just don't get it. At worst, we lie to ourselves and others about who it is we really are and what it is we really seek. Whereas this may be acceptable in the arena of entertainment, real democracy does not allow for persons to see what they want to see rather than what actually is. Furthermore, to hide or shield one's intent under the cloak of an abstract ideal is just sleight of hand. For instance, the phrase "Make America Great Again" allows people to see what they want to see. However, to strategically use it as a means to make America white again is to abstractly disguise an unacceptable goal under the guise of something that in its taken for granted form appears acceptable and desirable. This is straight wickedness. It is an act of bad faith. It is crooked. But this is our politics. You see, kings speaking of crooked places being made straight calls us to a higher morality in our politics, in our country, and in ourselves. It is not something that's separate and apart from the dream. It is a necessary component of the dream. However, one cannot lead others where they themselves have not gone or where they themselves have no intention to go. How can a bigot let freedom ring? They cannot. Neither can one who is lawless in their heart maintain law and order. My view is that the Democratic Party is as responsible for the making of Donald Trump as president as the Republican Party is for maintaining his presidency. The Democrats had a primary that really wasn't a primary. Again, the disguising of the unacceptable under the guise of what appears acceptable. It was already decided that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee. In essence, the manifestation of our current situation is a manifestation of our own crookedness. And now our crookedness has been laid to bear for the world to see. While we have put forth the assertion that we are that great city on a hill, we have failed to rid ourselves of our own crookedness, or what some people might call our own demons, so that the high place and the arrogance of our own minds need now be shown openly. We can actively take part and work out our salvation, or we can ignore our reality and thereby abdicate any standing of righteousness. We cannot place our heads under a bushel and say to the rest of the world, you should be like us, when in our hearts we know we are not what we should be. That would be crooked. How can we demand Islamic nations drive out radical Islamic terrorists when we've not driven the white supremacists out from us? A question was posed in the scriptures. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but fail to notice the beam in your own eye? Before you can remove the speck from your brother's eye, first remove the beam that hinders your own sight. Then with a more clear and perfect vision, you may be able to help your brother. Indeed, Jesus gives warnings to those hypocrites who will travel the world to make for themselves one proselyte. And when that proselyte was made 2 times the child of hell as the hypocrites themselves. We go all over the world proclaiming with our mouths that we are ambassadors of freedom and human dignity, and that our president is the leader of the free world. If that is the case, our president need only do one thing: let freedom ring. Nevertheless, Edmund Burke said, liberty does not exist in the absence of morality. Indeed, morality, freedom, and justice are inseparable, with the arc of the moral universe bending towards justice. Before ending, I give warning. For those who will not stand for the rule of law and due process, they open themselves up to the very power dynamics they seek to exploit. Merriam-Webster defines tyrant as an absolute ruler, unrestrained by law or constitution. It appears a person may be elected president. However, upon their refusal to submit to the rule of law and the Constitution, they are no longer acting under the authority of the presidency as defined in the Constitution. Some would call such an event a constitutional crisis. I call it someone deciding to be a tyrant. If bloodshed then results from the actions of a tyrant and their misinformed followers, then the lack of constitutional powers, the rule of law and due process allows for whatever justice can be meted out. Thomas Jefferson said in speaking of tyrants and their misinformed followers, the remedy then is to set them straight. The remedy then is to set them right as to the facts. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. I am in no way advocating violence, but it has been said, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. That being said, if you have not done so, arm yourselves and begin to organize. It could get nasty. For those of us who desire to remain free, we should prepare ourselves to defend that freedom. For we are not organizing to overthrow a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, but to ensure that tyranny is kept at bay in the event that should such government fail. I have a bit more to say, however, due to time constraints, I am limited. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
I love my students. Good morning. Before I share my thoughts on today's topic, I'd like to thank the Global Diversity Task Force for inviting me to join this panel, because this is exactly the kind of event I encourage my students to attend so they can understand the importance of public dialogue. I'm thankful that for the second year in a row, our community college has embraced an exchange of ideas and opinions of topics that affect our environment. So thank you, Mr. Raboli and team, for honoring the intention to keep this dialogues going, even when we've had a few obstacles entering this semester. Now, the theme for today's panel is leading and empowering change. And the question I received was, what are some of the times you stood up for justice and equality? I thought long and hard about this question. I remember the times when we walked into a legislator's office, or the times when I've had the opportunity to talk to local leadership about Latinos in Wayne County. I remember the times when I spoke to our local media about causes that help our community, such as Habitat for Humanity and Go Wayne Go. But the more I thought about those moments, the more I realized those were only small parts of my journey as an advocate of human rights. Because you see, the more I thought about that question, the more I realized that I stand up for justice and equality every single day by living my truth and empowering my students to join me in being a part of a culture of solution and change. So this is the angle I'll use to approach this question, and this is why. In a culture filled with conflict and disagreement, it has almost become a norm to approach most situations like debates. In the media, we hear extreme polarizations every day, and we're exposed to hateful rhetoric when trying to change any policy. And you see, I'd like to think this is exclusive to national politics or national media, but I must bring this home because this is a WCC dialogue after all. And in this community, I have seen people who use their belief systems to speak to rally to one side of a cause before they even listen to the other one. Or even worse, they attack what's different, lacking the vision of how important it is to create a unified and thriving community. Now, it isn't that my classes and I walk around campus holding signs all the time that protest a cause every day, but each day, I teach my students to listen. Listen to the positions, beliefs, and values others have. And rather than impulsively entering an argument, consider their stories. That's when this process of empowering and leading change begins in my life each day, in my classroom. Because when we learn to listen, we recognize that there are differences in our community, but those differences are smaller than the human dialogues we need to be having. So then I offer tools. 1, I create an environment that promotes diversity and inclusion. We do this by making our classroom one that supports both critical thinking and a fearless exchange of ideas. 2, we remove labels. This community loves labels. So many of my students came to me with one-dimensional titles like Republican, Democrat, Libertarian. And in many occasions, those labels were stuck to them before they even understood their meaning or realized that they had an option to see many sides to an issue. And 3, We learn how to use our voices with power to influence change. Let me make sure I clarify. We learn not to raise our voice, but rather to raise our words with purpose. It is beautiful to see so many of my students walking a little taller as they become more confident and empowered to speak up and advocate for larger issues that affect all of us, instead of staying centered in those labels or places that prevented them from experiencing justice, wisdom, and courage. So every now and then, you may see Noah walking around campus with words written in his face as he defends human rights. Or you may see Serena wearing a shirt that contains those names of those who have died in shooting massacres. You may see Eris or Mary working on poems or art that explain feminism. Taylor explaining to a new audience that millennials are a force to be reckoned with. Christina talking about DACA and dreamers. Yes. Or you may see determined groups of students bringing awareness of rape in college campuses, fighting against human trafficking. Or some of them will simply carry a flag. But most of the time, we simply stand up for what we believe in by knowing what it is that we believe in, wearing our truth, speaking up each time we're giving a platform. And if we have to wear a label, then we choose the one of advocate. Understanding and accepting that our educated and passionate voices are a weapon to leading and empowering change. And that's how I fight for justice and equality each day. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to change the tone just a little bit. Of course, that's what I do, isn't it? It's good to see all these lovely faces out there, a lot of beautiful people. I want to kind of piggyback on what they've been saying. They've talked a lot about what's going on, and we know things are going on that some we like, some we don't like. But what can you do as students, and what can you do as non-students here? And that's the thing. Can you be an advocate as well? Well, you do have tools. What I'd like you to do is, how many people in here, raise your hand if you'd like to see peace throughout the world? Wow. Keep your hands up. Keep them up. That's everybody. Wow, okay. Well, there's a start. I don't know how many people in here, what, 150? Something like that. But we have all these people. Now keep your hands up. I didn't say take them down. All right? So look at your hand in the air. What you're looking at from here, what I see is everybody's got their hands raised. I want you to keep it in the air and repeat after me. Okay? I will do my best to get along with everybody I meet. Okay. Now hold your hand in front of you. All right, and look at your hand. Your hand is a mighty tool that you've been given. Do you know what you can do with your hand? Do you have any idea? Not only, what I'd like you to do, first of all, is reach over to someone next to you and shake their hand. Smile at them. You've just made a friend, okay? You can make a friend with your hands. But I want to list several other things you can do with your hand. I can say hello, and I can say goodbye, right? I can tell someone that I love them. What is it? I love you, or all together, or the little heart thing. I can do a lot with this hand. I've actually used this hand as a screwdriver. If I have my fingernails long enough, I can unscrew a screw. Has anybody ever done that? Most of us have. I can use it like a wrench and unwrench something. I can use it to reach out to help somebody, can I? And pull someone up. I can also use it to hold somebody down. I can use this hand to create. I can use it to destroy as well. You choose what you do with your hands. You can point someone out back there. I have friends back there and family. That shows support. You can scold somebody. No, I've never scolded anybody in a class, I don't think. Or have I? I give eye statements. I don't use my finger in class. That can be disrespectful. I just use my eyes, stare them down. You can hold another person's hand, right? And comfort them. You can show somebody that you were angry and you don't like what they're doing. But you can also show them peace and love with that same hand. I can fix things with this hand. I can break it too, like my door stopper. I don't know if you remember last semester, but I had a hand in that. I can tell people it's okay, right? It's going to be okay. Now, there are going to be some hand gestures I'm not going to use today. But you can read between the lines, right? I can pet my pet. I can pet an animal, show love. I can caress something with my hand. I can wipe the sweat off my brow with my hand. I can hold my head in shame when I've done something that I probably should not have done. I can scratch an itch with my hand, which feels good. And I can scratch your itch, too. Oh, you can use your hand to text. Some of you are probably doing that right now. But that takes thumbs. You can type. You can write. You can tap when you're bored. I've heard that in class a few times. I can snap, right? Now, if I'm in a jazz club, then I can tell someone to stop with my hand. I can tell someone to go. Come on, let's go. I can tell someone to cut. If I speak too long, cut it. Cut it. Use my hand in many different ways. I can spank with this hand. I can mold with this hand. I can keep from getting cold with this hand. I can play an instrument with this hand, and I can write a book with this hand. I can stir a pot. I can flip a burger. I can open a door for me and for you with this hand. I can serve with this hand. So what's the most powerful tool you have? It's your hands. Use your hands. Use them for the positive things. I've listed many things. But if you can use them to lift somebody up, to show someone they're okay. You know, one thing I do in my class is I honestly believe in treating people with respect. I think a smile goes a long ways. A hand gesture does go a long way as well, communicating without even speaking. But one thing you can do with this hand is go to a voting booth and vote with this hand, right? How many of you are going to be eligible to vote the next election? How many plan on voting? All right. That's what you can do with your hand. So, that's my message. You have the tools. It's like what Dr. Walker said. You have the tools within you. This is just a hand. Wait till I get to the mouth next time. Oh my God. What you can do with your mouth, that's yours. Okay. We'll let Andrea take care of that. But this is just one body part. And it can do magnificent things. It is sculpted. It is painted some of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. It's helped people out of ditches. It's helped people on the land when they've been at sea too long. They've pulled people out of some of the worst circumstances. Don't underestimate your hand and what it's capable of doing. And that's my message to you, is that that's what I want to bring to you, is that you can impact something. Your vote counts. Raising your hand when people ask things. You know, I sometimes run a little democracy in my classroom, and I'll take votes on things and what people want to do. And it's important that you vote and that you raise your hand when someone asks you a question. And I appreciate everybody in here raising your hand about wanting to help everybody. So you've taken the pledge. So the meeting is next week. Just jot this down. No, we're not going to have a meeting. But we're doing everything here at Wayne Community, I think, to really push the diversity, to try to open eyes. When I came here 28 years ago, I was extremely naive. I didn't know what I was, politically or how I felt about things. I just worked every day until, circumstances prevented me from doing that. But coming back to Wayne, I'm very much encouraged. Working with Andrea with the Student Multicultural Club is a blessing for me to be able to see these students are absolutely amazing. And I look forward to the future. I have hope because I know you guys. We have the greatest people. So you guys get back to class now? Okay. And I'm going to end mine with that. And I want to say goodbye. And I will see some of you at 1 o'clock. I think, Noah, I'll see you at 1 o'clock. And y'all have a great day, and I'll pass it on to next.
To Dr. Walker, the Cultural Diversity Committee, to my esteemed colleagues, and to the students of Wayne Community College. It is my honor and privilege to address you this afternoon. In reference to achieving the dream, I will begin by saying that I'm a living example of learning to achieve through having a dream. Growing up here in Goldsboro, North Carolina, I had the opportunity of watching the University of North Carolina play basketball, and one of my heroes was Charlie Scott. And so my dream was to go to the University of North Carolina and play for Dean Smith and be one of the leading scorers in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Of course, my height would not allow that to happen, and so therefore I ended up still going to Carolina, which was my dream. But Dr. King made a statement, and I will paraphrase it, that I want to grow up in a nation where, or I want to see a nation where my children will play together with others, and they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. My mother was a school teacher, and she was one of the first to integrate the public school system here in Wayne County, and being as such, she carried me with me to Meadow Lane School. There I had the opportunity of playing with others of different races, different nationalities, and learning together. And so I understand that part of the dream. And that part of the dream that he has come to reality. We are playing together. We are working together. We're living together. But the other aspect of the dream has not come true yet. We're still hold differences that need to be broken down. We hold barriers that need to be taken down. As an advocate for justice and as an advocate for equality, I've had the opportunity to march in different marches here in North Carolina, the HK on J Street March. I participated in that twice. Here in Goldsboro, North Carolina, I participated in a march led by Dr. William Barber. But my reason for being part of that is not so much to just be in the number, but to be a voice to say that there can be a change if you really want a change. Change is not always done on a large scale, but it's done on a local level. What can you do to make a change? First of all, you have to be in the right place at the right time. That means get a good education. It means allow whatever place God has you or puts you in, or whatever place, whatever supreme being you believe in, puts you in. You are in the right place at the right time to be willing to speak up. It will not be easy. There have been times I've been in meetings where I know I was welcome to the meeting, but my ideas weren't welcome. They listen to you, but they don't accept what you say. And that's still true. But by speaking up, you make it known what needs to happen. And if you watch carefully, change does occur because you did speak up. It's not easy growing up in this society of different systems and what's going on. And we see that we've come out of slavery. But if you're not careful, we'll go back into slavery. Not slavery in terms of handcuffs, not slavery in terms of working on the farms or the fields, but economic slavery. Watch the laws that are being created. Watch how they impact the society. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. How do we change? You have to take a belief in the things that you know and ask your heart to change. Until our hearts change for a love of people, then our laws won't change. And that has to be done on an individual basis. We need people with good hearts in position. One of the things I found out years ago that I learned in the 80s, as you know, there's a rise in the white supremacy movement. Well, years ago, one of the leaders of that movement said, we're going to change our tactics. We're going to change our methods. We're no longer going to wear white sheets, but we're going to wear suits. We're going to get into positions of power. We're going to be elected to positions where we can effect change through the laws. So yes, it is important that you vote, but it's also important that you know what you're voting for and who you're voting for. Have good ideas, know what you stand for. Vote for those things that you know will help everyone, not just one aspect of society. Know that you are the difference in this world. You are considered the millennial generation. You have access to all kinds of technology that when I grew up, all there was television and radio. But now you have all other kinds of media, all kinds of chats. Be a voice to society. Let them know that you don't want to stand, you as a society don't want to continue to stand for what's wrong, but you want things for right. One of my dreams is, and will not be a reality, that humanity will love others and help others, not just in disasters, but all throughout the year. Around Christmas, Thanksgiving, there's a spirit of giving, sharing, but January through October, some on a small scale, but not on the large scale that it is on those other months. So if you really want to see change in justice, in how our society changes, then you as an individual must become involved. You must educate yourselves so that you can be invited to the table where decisions are made. You must be willing to express your opinion and make sure they know that you're basing it on fact and not just your opinion, because it's facts and truth that wins out. If it's true and it's fact, they will try to deny it, they will try not to believe in it, but eventually it will win out. Truth and justice is the cornerstone of a good society. When our morals and our injustice begin to happen, that's when nations begin to fall. The fall of the Roman Empire was because of the immorality of its leaders and the immorality of its people. If we want to continue to be the great nation of the United States of America, not being made great again, but being who her creeds called us to be, then we must learn to go back to those things that made us great in terms of our morality, in terms of our understanding, our spirituality, in terms of how we treat one another. And if we do that, then we will effect change, not just here, not just in our nation, but also in our state and in our community and here at Wayne Community College. Thank you.
So now I'll ask each panelist to answer two questions. Patrick, we'll go in alphabetical order again. Patrick, was there a particular event that motivated you to become an activist or active for a cause?
I don't know if I am an activist or advocate for any kind of specific cause. I think it's good to use your time for something positive, but I don't try to focus on just one particular avenue of change, if that makes sense. I like to look at it holistically and try to attack the system rather than tentacles of the system.
Very good, very good. Second question for Patrick, and everyone will answer the same questions. What advice can you give to members of the audience who really care about a cause but don't yet know how to channel that passion or don't know how or where to begin? How does someone become active?
I think you have to look at your community and look for the people that are engaged in the community and seek them out. Like just yesterday, I went and talked to a pastor about getting involved with helping people re-enter society after getting out of prison. So there's all sorts of people out there doing stuff. You just have to find them and seek them out. And you have to have a willingness to do that and a passion for helping other people, really. And if you do have that, you'll find it.
Thank you. David, same question. Was there a particular event that motivated you to become active or be an activist or get involved?
Not a particular event, but a series of events. As I came up and was reared, I just saw a lot of injustice. I saw police killing African-American males. There was an African-American male that was shot in my backyard when I was about 10 years old. And the guy was shot in the back. A few years after then we had an incident where Goldsboro police actually choked to death an African-American male and, said he swallowed drugs and nothing ever became of that. There was a settlement to the family. Just this idea that, people in power do what they want to do, and when they're called to account, they make up all of these excuses that make no earthly sense, but we're supposed to swallow it. And with me, I'm like, I'm gonna do something about it. And what I did was, I said I wasn't gonna be a statistic. I was gonna change myself. I was gonna get educated. I wasn't gonna be that thug on the corner. I was not gonna let them lock me up for riding dirty. I was gonna be what they didn't want to see, an educated, well-spoken black man.
Andrea, was there a particular event that motivated you to become active, be an activist?
So, Dean, I often tell my students something. Before I worked as an instructor, I had jobs in public relations, supporting different institutions or organizations. And when you work in public relations, you have to support that cause. So if I worked for Habitat for Humanity, I had to learn to advocate for Habitat for Humanity, Go and Go. If I worked for the government, when you work in public relations, you stand up for what that organization stands up for. And that's kind of how I learned how to advocate for something, but I often also tell them that that's not why I became an advocate. It's experience, but I think that being a Latina in Wayne County and having faced some of the things I have faced in the community, because you see me and you see an instructor that's got a microphone on and you're like, oh, she must know what she's talking about maybe. But if you see me at Walmart or Target and you don't know me from the next person, the perception of most people in the community see me as a particular type of Latino in Wayne County, and they immediately assume. And through that, I've heard many comments that have been very negative towards me or my children. And it's hard to believe how negative people can be about a different race in a county that I love so dearly. But that's what helps me become an advocate, I think, more than all the other experience I had professionally or academically. I think being a Latina really kind of pushes this.
Right,
So.
right. Well, I feel a little silly asking sorry. The second question is what advice can you give to the audience to get involved? But judging from your students are already involved, they're already very active. You're already doing that, but just if you could say very, quickly, how do you get people involved? What is your motivating tactic to get everyone involved?
I asked them to pick a village. So I was just telling Bill, and I know we have this too, a lot of our students pick our classes. So they're starting to pick their village. Who do they want to learn from? And they're picking the instructors. They don't have to take our class. Some of them have to take our classes.
Well, they pick me because I'm easy.
But they come from Brashears to me. They go to you. Like, it's that they pick the village, but not only here. Sort of like what you said, I go out in the community and I have a spiritual guide through my pastor that gives me guide when I need it. I got my yoga instructor, and so the same for you. I tell you guys, go pick your village. You have a choice. You might have a circle that you've grown up with, and maybe that looks like you and talks like you and has gone to the same church as you, but now it's time that you select your village. And it might be that you have to step from that group to another village to then start kind of creating your own. If you want to become a global view sort of advocate, you've got to step out of the comfort zone. That's the advice I give.
Exactly. Thank you. Bill, same question. Was there a particular event that motivated you to become an activist or active or get involved?
Well, I've had time to think about it.
Well,
So I have a three-pronged response to you. The first is my family, how I was raised. I was raised by people who did not disrespect other people, who appreciated other people, and taught us to be nice to everybody, that everybody is equal. Second incident was education. Education made me understand why people do what they do. As a psychology instructor, I enjoy people's stories. They're all different, and I love the reality that they create for each other, and I've created for myself. Education has brought me to understanding, to gain that understanding. Third was an incident with my daughter, and I've mentioned this in class, but I remember asking her, she was 5 or 6 years old, and I asked her what she wanted to do when she grew up, and she said, I want to be a veterinarian or nurse or one of those common things that a 4 to 6 year old said. And I looked at her and I said, well, what about President of the United States? And what was her response? Daddy, I'm a girl. That broke my heart. So I believe in advocating. I will stand up for any child out there. I worked with abused kids for a long time, and a lot of those kids, for better choice of words, were crapped on most of their lives. And it was a honor to stand up for some of them. So that's my three-pronged approach. Thank you. What you can do is get involved. We have multicultural clubs. We have all different clubs on this campus. Get involved in something. And like Andrea said, I like that. Get out of your comfort zone. Jump off that cliff. You really have not much to lose right now. Just jump in there and see what happens. And if you join our club, we'll be very gentle, won't we? So
Advertising for the club.
yes, there's a meeting Thursday tomorrow at Azalea 203 at 2:30.
Okay.
No plug.
I love that.
Very good. Harold?
Growing up in high school, one of the things about myself personally is that I learned to be a leader. And in that, once you recognize that, then you find yourself being involved. I was part of the Mayor's Youth Council at one time, the Inter-School Council, so forth and so on. But the main thing that got me involved in being active was after I became a pastor, I realized that I was leading people. And if I wanted them to be good citizens, then as a pastor, I should be involved in the social and other aspects of life than just the spiritual. And so being a pastor, being a good leader means that I need to be involved in society, what's going on in their community, knowing what's happening in society so that I can speak intelligently to them about what is happening and not training, but challenging them to think differently, how they treat others and how they treat themselves. Sad to say, but even in churches, you have to challenge people in their thinking because they've been thinking one way for so long that you have to raise their level of thinking. So as Scripture says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Well, if you want to change how people think, you got to involve their mind and get them to look at things objectively. And so that's pretty much the main reason why I'm so involved in all areas of society as I can.
Thank you, thank you. And what advice for the audience to get involved if they want to support a cause or not exactly sure how to get started behind that cause?
Do your homework, research, become knowledgeable about the topic, the subject, seek out people of different opinions, get a chance to talk with them and ask them, and then form your own opinion, form your own philosophy about it, and then get involved with the area of the side that you want to support, and do all you can while you can, because there will come a time when you wish you could have and you didn't. That's my advice. Do the research and then get involved.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you. So now we want to open this up to questions from the audience. You can ask questions of the panel in general. You can ask a particular speaker. If you get a yellow card when you came in, you can also write your question on a card and give it to one of the people working the crowd here. And that way your question can be acknowledged and asked of the audience, of the panel. You can also text your question, I believe.
Ready to go.
So if anyone has a question for the audience, for the panel, the panel.
We ready to pop one up? There it is.
Let me read it. Okay. Every panelist spoke on education in some form. What is one non-academic subject that you can like to see taught, that you like to see taught and help bringing change for? Something. For the better. Sorry.
Could you repeat the question?
I'll try. Okay. Every panelist spoke on education in some form. What is one non-academic subject that you would like to see taught to help bring about change for the better?
I'll address that. It's hard to say something is non-academic because once you begin to teach something, it becomes academic. Whatever is taught, whatever areas that's taught, that becomes academic if it's taught on a formal educational form. What would I like to see? Perhaps how to deal with one another in small groups. Because sometimes when you're in groups, there's always, when you look at groups, there's always be one who's outspoken, one or two who will have ideas but won't say anything, and then you have one who won't say nothing at all and just wait for things to happen. There needs to be a method of teaching how everybody can be involved so that their ideas won't be, they don't think they're not important. How to function in small groups.
I can add to that,
Thank
the
you.
answer to that. Yes, when you're teaching, kind of sort of all becomes part of it, but I often tell my students I wish with all my heart that there would be a class in like first, second, third grade called listening,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Of course.
I mean, I think we do a good job here teaching students to listen at this level, but at this point they're already 16, 17, 22, 25. So many of them have already come to this picture with a particular, with all of these ideas of what life in reality is. Had they been exposed in first grade to like 30 minutes of listening, second grade to an hour of listening, that's like my wish, if I had a superpower. So, so I think that I tell them often, if we could do that, if we could teach listening from the beginning of their academic career, I think things would be so different.
Right. Right.
Well, I would love to teach a class on race and ethnicity that's free, whereby there would be no tests, no quizzes, and offer that free to the public. There's a, you know, a lot of us still think that God made black people. That ain't true, okay? And we need to come to understand how races came into being. And until we do that and we address those issues, you know, we're going to keep reproducing these stereotypes and these expectations and basically undercut the arrival of the dream. So that's mine.
Thank you, Dave. Patrick?
I mean, I would just like to teach without tests, period. I mean, I'd like government without a test. Because tests seem to be redundant at this point. But I think, and when we do this, I agree, you can't take academia out of it, but It would be nice to see classes that focus solely on leadership skills, but leadership skills with a focus on organizing a community. That would be nice to see, teaching leadership and organizational skills so people can go out and not just advocate for a cause, but maybe become the cause.
Can I speak to this for a second? Like the word non-academic or something like that. A lot of the things that get said in classroom, they may not actually be on the exam, but seriously, that's really the most important information. We have to give a grade, and we have to give a grade based on something, and that's where the exams and quizzes come from. But really the most important stuff we cover in class is not academic so much as it's breaking down ignorance. I do not think that prejudice can exist where there is a lack of ignorance. I think ignorance breeds prejudice. So what we're trying to do up here, I think, as educators, is break down ignorance, and thereby we're breaking down prejudice. So that's one of the things I can say about education. But also, I'll say one more thing about education. Education does not just take place in the classroom. Sure. Education does not just take place on a college campus or a university campus or something like that. People who are not in school can educate themselves. Educate yourself. Educate yourself any way you can. That breaks down ignorance. Thank you. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah. Is there anyone in the audience?
So in the era of modern technology, is traditional protests where you go out and march still effective, where the perception can be easily changed through mass media and the way that false information can easily be spread through the internet due to people's lack of willingness to do research on their own?
So let me see if I can, that question. Are you asking basically, in the era of mass media and quick communication, is the mass march protest still effective? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, the power of the editor has always existed. I mean, if you look at television cameras or newspaper articles, they've always used editorial techniques to change perception. So I don't know if it's that much more different. Maybe it's more instant now, but look, the way I see it, all information is meant to manipulate. There's anyone that writes anything or says anything, even this panel here, we are all in a sense trying to convince you of our own idea and get you on the same page as us. So I don't think technology makes protesting or marching or working for a cause null and void. It can be used as a way to enhance it, but every individual has to understand that there's an element of bias in every piece of information you digest. If we are conscious of that, then we will be manipulated less. If that makes sense.
I kind of want to piggyback off of that. Think about this. So you have smartphones, and on your smartphones there's cookies, and you have laptops, and you have desktops, and there's cookies. And so you go to these different websites, and corporations are actually keeping track of where you go, so that if you notice when you cut on the computer and you cut on the internet, certain things come up. The question that we need to really address as a society is, how does that add to freedom? Now, yes, access to more diverse types of information does give us more options. However, to the extent that corporations can manipulate that for the bottom line, we might think we're free, but it might lead to a situation where we're really not free at all, if that makes sense.
Thank you, David. Andrea?
I feel terrible for your generation. So I think you're asking that question because you guys have so many outlets, and it can be so overwhelming, and I think that you're starting to find out that it's going to be very difficult to know which one's telling the truth. And I think what Pat said is probably the best thing here is everyone's trying to manipulate to some extent, right? So you kind of have to understand what it is that you believe in first. If you understand what you believe in first, then we're okay, because you know what it is that you support and you stand for, and then you can continue to ask that question. So it's kind of like a layer, because you guys do have, I mean, you scroll down through anything, and there's just so many choices and so many views, you're right. I mean, it's all just so tainted. And journalism has evolved, and anyone can call themselves a journalist now, and you have all this fake news. So I do feel terrible for your generation, because you do have so many choices, but at the same time, shift by knowing what it is that you do stand for, and try to research as much as you can on that topic. Like if I'm looking about DACA, right, Christina, then we're going to read about DACA, not because of what we're seeing in the news, like one way or the other, but we are going to make sure that before we speak about it, we really know what that legislation is saying. So don't let that be what influences you, but instead you select what it is. You have to. There's just too many choices for you guys.
Yeah, so check out my blog at www.imlyingto.com.
Bill?
Yeah, technology is definitely a double-edged sword. It hits us in all places, whether it's in our warehouses or manufacturing plants. Eventually, we go to high technology and people lose their jobs because of technology. Reading things like 75% of people get their news from Facebook is a scary, scary thing. These algorithms that they have are designed to feed you information that you show interest in. So if you're Democrat and you click on something Democratic, you will get fed everything pro-Democrat. But in psychology, there's a thing we talk about is creating our own realities. And that's where you have control. You're in control of you. You create the reality. Everybody in here has a different reality. We go home to a different home. We watch different TV shows. We have different taste in food, different taste in music, everything. We're different colors. Just everything's different. And we create it to ourselves. So therefore, you have to learn that we are so diverse and that technology is going to be there. It's going to be double-edged. But what happened this past weekend with the Women's March was awe-inspiring. And yes, you can manipulate it. I saw it trying to be manipulated, which was ridiculous. So educate yourselves to what is out there. Make your own decisions, and you're going to create the world for yourself. We just want to advocate that you make it an inclusive world that includes everybody and not segregates everybody into little sections. And so widen your girth, so to say. And don't let the media technology control you as much as you control it. Your thumbs are on that, so you control it. You can put it down and shake someone's hand or hold someone's hand for a while, right? So, or any of those. So that's my take on it.
Harold?
Well, first, I view protesting as a way to bring to the forefront an issue. And your constitutional right, you have the constitutional right to protest. My thing is, I think all of us who protest, whatever the cause might be, is you make sure you're educated on what that cause is and what it's about, and don't be confused with other issues that other people try to put or assign to it. And as an example, what I mean by that is, take, for example, our government, when they pass laws. They won't vote on just one law of what it's about, but they try to add other things to it to make a deal. And then you end up where you think you're voting for one thing, you have something else underneath that is contrary to what's good for society. So it's important that we know what's happening, and that's why I think it's important to protest. And the technology that is used helps to make us aware of what other people are thinking and why they're protesting. No matter what kind of spin is placed on it, I think technology is important because it makes the world aware of what's going on in the world. We are so much more connected now universally. We know what's going on in England and Japan, even more so now than we used to. So I think that's why technology is important, because it makes the universe aware of what's happening at other places. And you can agree or disagree, but being able to protest is one of the cores of our society that we ought to be thankful for.
Thank you, Harold. If I could say one thing about the old-fashioned, I call it old-fashioned mass protest, which I think you were asking about. When thousands of people march on Washington, D.C., that sends a message. That cannot be manipulated. It might be televised, it might be covered by the various media ways, but thousands of people marching on Washington, D.C. does still send a message. The thousands of empty seats at the inauguration, that sent a message. That sent a message. So look, and also look at the people who actually attended that. That sends a message. So don't give up on actual people turning out to do something or not turning out to support a particular person. That sends a message.
I thought that was the biggest inauguration crowd ever.
It was huge.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
So anyways, other questions?
Oh,
One-
my goodness.
Oh,
Thank you. I first want to tell a story before I ask my question. I knew a girl who was being bullied for being white, like brutally bullied, at a well-known coffee shop, I'm not going to say. And when she tried to bring it up, nothing was really done about it. My question is, do we turn a blind eye to the discrimination between the majority? Because this isn't the first time I've heard someone being, well, discriminated for something that the past has done. Or
No, you don't. You don't accept that. If I was there, I would probably intervene. And then if it was people that work there actually engaging in it, I would go to the supervisors. And the bottom line is that companies or corporations, they have a bottom line, and no form of discrimination is acceptable. I don't care, what group it's against.
Thank you, David. Other questions? Here's one.
Looking like this is going to be our last one.
In the nation we live in, it's basically formed on sinking sand. As young adults, how do we find a solid ground? You say pick your tribe, use the filters of love and truth and honesty. But in this nation full of craziness and bigotry and just basically sinking sand, where's our solid ground to stand at?
Where's our solid ground?
I don't know if it's so much even swim. If it seems to me it's becoming you're just going to sink. But we have to, I feel like we have to unite on an economic front and stop viewing ourselves as white. Race needs to be eradicated. Gender needs to be eradicated. Sexual orientation needs to be eradicated. We have to see ourselves as one economic unit because, as a few of us has mentioned, opportunities are getting slimmer, wages are stagnant, wealth is concentrated, and the people that are that benefit from this, they don't care who you fall in love with. They don't care what bathroom you go to. And they don't care so much about the color of your skin. They care about one thing, and that's maximizing profit. And I really feel until we realize the true position we are in and stop allowing ourselves to be split based on identities, then we're not gonna be able to swim. We're gonna continue to sink. I went to college, did the whole dance I was told to do, and I still had to work 2 jobs for most of the time that I've been a teacher. 4 months ago, I was working 3 jobs to take care of 2 kids. Something about that doesn't make sense. And until we unify behind this one front, I don't know what kind of change is truly possible. I know that sounds bleak, but
What I would say is that we need to view each other as human beings. We need to view each other as human beings and not as objects to be exploited for the procurement of capital or wealth. And in doing that, we ought to be able to look at each other and say that there is a basic level of human decency and respect, irrespective of social categorizations, that we ought to have towards ourselves and towards others. The bottom line is, if you read the Constitution and you believe in it, if you really try to find out what it is that they're saying, really try to get an understanding of it, I think that's a good basis.
I'll take a different angle since they've kind of done the general. I think I want to take it more in a personal angle. I think, Brittany, that a lot of the times we think that you guys are living just, you know, shaky grounds, but generations before you guys also lived shaky ground.
Yeah.
It just didn't have the media to make it like this huge like it is right now. Because, I mean, there's just so many sources. So it makes us feel this, like, false sense that we're living the worst of times, but
It's the best of times.
right? And so so taking it to a personal, grounding yourself sort of perspective is, don't allow yourself to be sold on that concept that we're living this crazy, but they were too before us, and the women that fought for our rights were living crazy things before us too, and they fought for me to be here, the Latina in the panel. But every morning, I wake up, and for just a minute, I close my eyes and I decide what my intention is for that day and what it is that I intend to do, what I intend to do with my students, what I intend to do with my child, with my other child that's not here because he's too little. What is it that I intend to do with me, with my health, just for a little bit. So when it's too shaky, if you just kind of ground yourself into knowing what it is that your intention is in that day, then it won't be as shaky anymore because you will know where you're going that day. And at the end of the day, you'll look back and you'll say, I've achieved my intention for the day. If you don't have a sense of self and a sense of understanding who it is that you are and who you want to be, if you don't have that, it is going to be shaky. Because you're just going to kind of add, right? You're just kind of going to tag along to the chaos. But if you're going to center yourself, I think you'll tag along to those of us who want to live in more harmony. So kind of choose your village and then choose yourself intention every morning. It's just a different perspective.
That's right.
Is your name Brittany? She's your foundation. He's your foundation. He's your foundation. Dr. Lawson's your foundation. Reverend is your foundation. And I'm your foundation. We are your foundation. Okay?
That's right.
That's all I got to say.
Listen, thank you all for attending. Thank you all for attending. I'm sorry we've run out of time, but thank you again for being here. Get involved with a noble cause, a worthy cause. If you have questions of the panelists, send them an email, okay? So we don't have maybe time for your question right now, but don't give up on your question. Don't give up on your cause. Thank you.